Today has been a long caregiver day.
Not only has the number of caregivers increased, but also the challenges they face day to day.
My experience is like 24 hours, 7 days a week.
You're my everything.
It's draining, it's emotionally stressful.
People find themselves trying to balance work, trying to balance caregiving, and it's financially debilitating, emotionally, physically, and spiritually.
Hi, I'm Sally Quinn, a Washington Post author and writer, and my guests today are here to talk about caregiving and how it's shifted since the pandemic. We have Representative Lauren Underwood, who has championed legislation around caregiving on the Hill. Lauren is a threefer, the first woman, the first person of color, and the first millennial to represent her community in Congress.
Yes, thank you.
And she is also the youngest African-American woman to serve in the House.
Yes.
So you're really a fourfer.
Yeah.
Barbara Ebel is a caregiver to a daughter with autism and a mother with Alzheimer's. And she is here today with her hair combed and both shoes on the right foot and well turned out, which is amazing already. And she has a job. Welcome, Barbara. Tim Shriver is the chair of Special Olympics and an advocate for people with intellectual disabilities. And he was also my choice for president in 2016. That's not a joke, but so thank you so much for joining me here today. You may wonder why I'm moderating this panel on caregiving. It's because my son Quinn, who is now 40, was born with a hole in his heart and learning disabilities, and he has been in and out of special hospitals and special schools much of his life. My mother was a stroke victim who was partially paralyzed and cognitively impaired for 12 years. My father was sick most of that time, and my late husband, Ben Bradley, was diagnosed with Alzheimer's and for his last 2 years of his life required constant caretaking. And not only that, my beloved dog Sparky died of cancer during that time. Wow. And I was the primary caregiver for all of them, and so I really get it. Barbara, you represent the sandwich generation. You have a daughter with autism and a mother with Alzheimer's, and you all live under the same roof. So, and we were talking about this in the green room.
We did.
How do you do it? Because you also have a full-time job and you're very successful at what you do. And I wonder if the pandemic has changed your life as a caregiver. But really, tell us how you do this, because most people couldn't.
Thank you, Sally, for the question. It has been challenging, and having to transition when the pandemic hit to all of us back in 2020, it was life-changing. My daughter, which many of you know, and if you know about the autism in general, kids are very structured, so changes are not really welcome to many of our kids. So all this time we have to change for remote, from physical school to remote. And my daughter was really not happy, and she was having some difficulty to basically be on the screen and be able to have a lot of kids looking at her. So she got a little intimidated. We have to take time to be able to support her. I was actually juggle between being on the screen for my own job and be able to do my own work and be able to support her. as a result of these changes and being in remote learning environment, she developed depression. So right now she's actually sort of like a regress emotionally. So she wants to just be in her room, and she's feel that COVID, and this is literally what she said to me, COVID have destroyed her life.
She's 17 now,
and she's only 17. And the reason is because she was not accustomed, and all of our kids were not accustomed to be able to be in this remote environment. And she was actually, quite socially. She likes to be with her friends, and she misses to play with her friends. But all of a sudden, we have to be locked up for a year and a half.
But you have your mother at the same time.
I did have my mother, and at the same time, I have to take care of my mother that had Alzheimer's. We didn't have any caregiver during that time because we were afraid that if we were going to bring somebody to help me in the house, that person could potentially, have COVID.
So you did both.
I did both, and at the same time, I was working full time.
And does your mother know who you are? Does she?
My mother, no, she doesn't.
No.
She has a pretty severe Alzheimer's, and I was trying. I feel like I was going from one room to the other, taking care of my daughter and my mother, and but I have to say that I was very lucky because I have a very supporting husband. He was actually helping me in being with my daughter, helping her in the remote learning environment when I was in another room, basically doing my job with my work. So yes, it was challenging, but I did a lot a lot of work in trying to speak to her and be able to understand that this is only going to be temporary, and then that we're here to support her. And I was able to also call other people in the community that were also helping us as well. So we were able to get through.
Is everybody in your household on antidepressants?
Well,
that's a serious question.
Well, I think sometimes I feel, I feel like I'm a superwoman.
Right, you are.
And because a lot of times that I was wondering if I needed help myself because...
Right. Yeah. You do need help. Sometimes the caregiver is the one who needs the most care. And I know that because I've been there.
And I'm so sorry. So that's why I became an advocate, because a lot of time people don't look at the parents. And that so I became someone that is going to be advocating for our parents, because sometimes we forget that we are human beings, and that we need that social support, that community support, and I do have it, but I'm helping other parents. I have a lady that she's actually is with my daughter. I mean, her son is with my daughter in the same school in classroom, and she came to me over the weekend to say, I'm struggling because the school is really not supporting my child that has a disability, and she doesn't have the means, because sometimes we have to hire an attorney to be able to go through the litigation process to making sure that the school system is actually doing what is right for our kids. I'm not saying that the school is not, but sometimes there's some things that they're not executing. So, and I said, well, did you have the support from your family? And she said, no, saying I don't have the financial means. So I was able to connect her with some resources that is actually helping her to be able to get to the next stage. So that's why we have to fight for what is right for our kids and our parents, because if we don't take care also of the parents, that they're actually, like myself, that I get emotional here, and it's okay to be emotional, and to make sure that they're actually in a good place, how can they take care of their kids?
Right. Well, so, Tim, you've been through this because your mother started Shriver started Special Olympics because her sister, Rosemary, had intellectual disabilities. How did growing up with Rosemary affect you and your family in terms of caretaking?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's an honor to, I'm not sure, I don't think I belong, honestly, on this panel, not just because of the distinguished guests, but for obvious other reasons, but I'm happy to be here as the son of a powerful woman, the brother of a powerful woman, the husband of a powerful woman. So I'm going to try to channel their energy. My mom would always tell the story of her own mother in the 1920s and 30s, putting the phone down day after day and muttering the words, "There's nothing for Rosemary. Nothing. Nothing." And her voice would trail off, nothing. No health care, no school, no child care, no tutorials, no physical therapy. And it always reminded me of a quote I heard from a mom in our movement, in the Special Olympics movement. "I wouldn't change my child for the world, but I would change the world for my child." I think that was the animating spirit that my mother had. Not that anything was wrong with her sister, but there was a lot wrong with the way her sister was being treated by the world. It animated her desire to help found the NICHD, founded really, founding energy, yes, President Kennedy and the leaders of Congress in those days, but I'm very proud that it's the only institute in the NIH named for a human being. It's called the Eunice Kennedy Shriver National Institute of Child Health and Human Development. So it animated my mom's whole life to change the course of history, not just for her own sister, but for those around her. Today, we made a lot of progress, and not enough, but we've made a lot. But we've got a long way to go. Around the world, 80% of children with intellectual disabilities never go to school. Never. Not one grade, not one lunchbox, not one pencil case, not one walk to school, not one bus, not one recess, not one birthday party their whole lives. So there is an almost criminal backdrop here. The largest caregiving institution in the world is schools. 12, 13, some places 6 years, some places 8 years, but in the United States, thank God, somewhere between 12 and 13 years of support for families in the helping in the raising of children. Those opportunities are denied to children around the world, and even here in the United States, we still have so much social isolation facing children with special needs, and as a result, the burden falls on their caregivers. The only thing I think I can add concretely to this conversation is a plea for a change in values. It sounds so fundamental and so abstract, but we value competition, we value success, we value achievements, we value money, we value political power, we value all these things. It's fine, it's good, I do too. But unless we begin to equally value compassion and equally value relationships, this is one of the great lessons of the Special Olympics community. You come to a Special Olympics event, many of you may have been, and you know you're in a place that values relationship more than power. It's just obvious. Everybody gets it. And so caregivers, if you can call them that, coaches, volunteers, people of goodwill, flock for themselves, for their own health, for their own spiritual strength, for their own emotional stability. I just want to mention one thing. There's a company that's looking at this in the healthcare space. Representative Underwood might be interested in this. It's a small company, but what it does is it's Medicare approved to diagnose the supports needed for caregivers and provide treatment and supports for the caregivers. They've already proven they can delay people going into nursing care by almost 2 years if you just support the caregivers. Huge savings to the government just by supporting caregivers. So I think there's a cultural challenge we're facing across all these walks of life to remove some of the stigma associated with vulnerability. And to, in some ways, I dare say, celebrate. No one wants to have these tremendously challenging problems, but all of us, in some ways, are capable of responding much more joyfully and powerfully and successfully than we have valued in the past. And maybe one little lesson in our movement is that caregiving can be an enormous source of joy if it's supported by the culture and the community. When it's isolating and painful, it leads to a very difficult and often very damaging outcomes. Thank you.
Lauren, you have commented before about the fact that women especially left their jobs during the pandemic to be caregivers. And we all know that caregiving is a woman's work. Sorry, Tim.
Yeah, no, but I mean, you heard Barbara said that she had a supportive husband. Once in a while, the men come through. Not often, sadly, but once in a while.
And I mean, I just think for me, it would have been unimaginable for my husband, Ben, to leave his job as editor of the Washington Post to take care of Quinn, even though I was a full-time reporter at the Post. And so I had to quit my job. And I wouldn't have had it any other way. But the fact is that that's what happens. And so, Lauren, I'm wondering, how do we lessen the load for women?
Well, we know that, especially during the time of the pandemic, this has come into a sharp focus, right? We're in this period of economic recovery across the country. We tout the record number of jobs that have been created, and yet so many people, so many women have permanently left the workforce because we haven't solved this issue. Right? We haven't solved childcare, we haven't solved caregiving, we haven't solved paid leave. And so you may remember about a year ago, the House passed a bill called Build Back Better that offered solutions to all three. Obviously that didn't move in the Senate, but it doesn't mean that our focus has lessened in any way in the House. We are laser focused on getting these across the finish line. And so one solution that I drafted was a bill called the Job Protection Act. So we're all familiar with the legacy piece of legislation called the Family and Medical Leave Act, FMLA. And many people know about FMLA, but they don't know that half of all workers aren't eligible for it. People who work for some small businesses aren't eligible. People who just started a new job aren't eligible. You know, there's just so many different reasons why folks aren't eligible. And so while there's so much energy around having a new universal paid leave benefit, which is good, and we absolutely need that in this country, we also need to make sure that we're expanding the baseline program, FMLA, so that all workers have an opportunity to have job-protected paid leave. Because if we only have a universal program, right, then that means that yes, you'll get paid, but then is your job going to be there when you're ready to go back to work?
Well, you said that 1 in 5 Americans provide unpaid caregiving.
Yes.
And, you know, the baby boomers are hitting old age now, and there's nobody to care for them. So what do we do about that?
Well, we certainly know that there's a lot of work that needs to be done to raise the wages of our caregiving economy. There's tremendous advocacy that's happening with the Domestic Workers Alliance and some of our labor unions in Illinois. SEIU leads a lot of this work to make sure that these are jobs that pay livable wages, that folks can have careers with dignity, right? Because this is an honorable profession, taking care of people in their most vulnerable moments. You know, I'm a nurse, and so, you know, I know a lot about taking care of people in times of significant medical need, but then, you know, when that nurse is not either visiting the home or there's a home healthcare aide or someone who comes in several times during the week to help with activities of daily living, oftentimes that person is not making a livable wage.
Yeah.
Right? We have to be able to support this workforce so that it can grow as we're facing the largest population entering into retirement and what we know about as people age, you know, acute medical needs that often come.
And I don't think people actually understand how hard caretaking is. I just think they don't get it.
The emotional strain, the
Right.
physical strain, the economic toll that's taken. There's sacrifice that occurs at all stages of this action that's often done with love because you care about this family member or community member, and yet they're not being supported properly.
Tim, you talk about this organization called T-Care, which is an electronic matching with patients and care. How does that work?
Well, it's just as I was describing earlier. It's a startup. It's an early stage venture, but it's accredited in 4 states already to take someone's situation. If I were caring for my dad, as I did when he had Alzheimer's, I would be able to.
I should just say that his father and my husband were in the same Alzheimer's men's group.
Yeah.
It was
and
very
they loved
sweet.
it. And they loved it.
They loved it,
support. Yeah. Another example of a community creating a support system, that time a community-based organization, starting a group for men who were struggling with memory loss. And But if you just give people a chance to log in and say, this is what I need, and not this is what my father needs, this is what my brother needs, my sister, my child needs, this is what I need, you can immediately get resources to people who often don't think they either deserve it. A lot of caregivers are so selfless, they think they don't deserve anything. They think they're pouring everything out, and they should, and they ought to, and they don't think they deserve the compassion and care. So I just think there's small adjustments we can make in the system. T-Care is a good example. But we've got to really think about how the mental, I hate to say it because it sounds so abstract, the mental model here, the Special Olympics movement is pushing this around the world, community-based supports that value children who have vulnerabilities, not just care for them, but value them. We don't value elders in our culture. We don't value the wisdom of
You don't feel valued?
Okay, let's not get started here. I'm supposed to be a caregiver here. You're testing me. But I do think that Representative Underwood is making a good point. There's legislation that can be passed, but there's a shift. Even our politics. I don't want to make this political, but our politics is so destructive of the human spirit. It wears us down, makes us not care about each other. Leads us, whether, it doesn't matter what party, I'm not talking about partisan politics here, I'm just saying we got to check ourselves a little bit, how we talk about one another, how we talk to one another, how we value one another, how we see the importance of treating people with dignity, even when there's vulnerabilities and
Tim?
Yeah, sorry.
We have time for one more quick question.
Okay, I'm shutting up. I did not take more time than the women on this panel. I just want to be clear.
Barbara, I want to ask you the last question. What does the idea of caring for the caretaker mean to you? I mean, who takes care of you?
My friends, my family, and the community. So I think if we can step up and be able to support the caregivers and be able to just make a simple call, how are you? Let's do a massage, let's do a nail. Just little things like that really makes a big difference. And to be able to, make them feel that people care and then that they're there to support them, and especially when they need it the most.
And Tim, you were saying one last thing about, I have one more question, one last thing about dignity. Why is dignity so important?
I think it's our God-given gift. And I think when we lose it, it creates an enormous pain and reaction. And I think when we give it to people, it creates an enormous positive cascading energy that can flow out into the culture. And I think what we see in people like Barbara and all of you who have given care is in those moments of great compassion and care, you treat someone with dignity, no matter how weak, no matter how vulnerable, no matter how close to their own, maybe even death they are. The energy released from those moments can change the world.
So we're just about out of time. I'm sorry, we could go on for a long time. This is a great panel. Thank you all very much. Barbara, Tim, and Lauren Underwood. Thank you. I'm so happy you were here today. And I think we've all learned a little bit about how important caretaking is, something that most people don't think about. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.